All right. So ready to really deep dive into something kind of different this time.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So we're not just like reading a diary, We're going full on spelunker into the mind of artist Brian Mills.
Right.
Through like a whole treasure trove of notes and sketches and even a little bit of like overheard gossip.
Wow.
It's kind of like we got backstage passes to the creative process,
Yeah.
right?
I'd say it's almost more like an archaeological dig, though.
Okay.
We're sifting through these layers of ideas and we're trying to like piece together this evolution of, Brian Mills' world.
Yeah.
Or as he calls it, BMW.
BMW. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
It's ambitious. It's catchy.
Yeah.
And judging by these early notebook entries from his time in Amsterdam, it's like a concept that was brewing for a while.
Absolutely. It's March 1999, and he's jotting down Dutch phrases, like just all over the place, sketching impressions of Van Gogh's work.
Really?
Even creating his own language. Yeah, it's really fascinating how he seems to be grappling with Amsterdam's duality.
Okay.
That like gritty underworld juxtaposed with its rich artistic heritage.
You're right.
I
It's
kinda-
like he's trying to decode like the essence of Amsterdam.
Yeah, totally.
But hold on, why create a whole new language?
Right.
It's this like concoction of Japanese and Icelandic and Hawaiian.
Right.
It's not exactly practical, for ordering stroopwafel or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's precisely the point, though.
Oh,
This isn't about practicality at all.
okay.
This is about pushing creative boundaries.
I see.
Remember, this is 1999,
Right.
long before the internet connected us all like it does now.
Yeah.
And this language feels almost symbolic of a worldview,
Okay.
that embraces interconnectedness, the blending of cultures.
I see.
It's almost like this premonition of like the globalized digital age to come.
Wow. That's pretty deep.
Yeah.
And, he's not just playing with words here.
Oh, yeah.
He's wrestling with the bigger picture. He's asking himself, like, after World War I and II, a modern age 1950s mentality came across the land.
Wow.
After that, a new space age 1970s,
Mm-hmm.
and now something else, 80s and 90s,
Right.
premillennial thought.
Right.
Almost anything 90s,
Yeah.
what is this time frame to be called? It's like he's feeling the pulse of this cultural shift,
Yeah.
but he's struggling to define it.
And that's where I think the concept of Brian Mills' world comes into play. It's not just a brand.
Right.
It's like his answer to this question.
Yeah, right.
He's creating his own space,
Yeah.
his own reality
Yeah.
within this rapidly evolving world.
I get it.
And if his language building is any indication,
Mm-hmm.
it's a world that transcends boundaries,
Okay.
that embraces the fluidity of identity and experience.
Now, this is where things get really interesting because a few months later, he's in Hawaii.
All right.
And the notebook explodes with sketches of logos and website layouts, even potential TV show segments.
Wow.
Like Brian Mills' world is starting to take shape.
Yeah, and it's clearly rooted in this idea of self-discovery
Okay.
and personal transformation.
Yeah, right.
Remember how in Amsterdam he was just like absorbing the energy of the city?
Yeah.
Now in Hawaii, he's turning inward.
Yeah.
He writes, I need to find happiness, and the most important thing is to remain true to yourself.
Wow.
It's almost like he's had a personal awakening.
He's 23,
Yeah,
enjoying, delicious Japanese food,
right.
soaking up the Hawaiian sun.
Yeah,
You can practically feel the shift in energy just by looking at these pages.
exactly. The seeds that were planted in Amsterdam are now like blossoming in this tropical environment.
I see.
And this idea of finding happiness becomes central to his vision for Brian Mills' world.
Okay.
He even compares it to football.
What?
Yeah, he says, get excited about Brian Mills' world like you do football.
Wow.
He's clearly aiming for mass appeal,
Yeah.
but on his own terms.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
He wants to create something that's both personally meaningful and culturally relevant.
Okay, but how does one go about creating their own world,
Right.
especially one that other people want to be a part of?
That's where his fascination with MTV comes in.
Really?
Yeah. He meticulously dissects their formula for creating successful shows,
Okay.
highlighting their use of music and visuals and quick cuts to capture attention.
I see.
This suggests he's not just a creative dreamer.
Yeah.
He's a strategic thinker.
Okay.
He wants to understand how to leverage popular culture to get his message across.
He's even sketching out ideas for Yahoo, personals ads.
Wow.
He's really thinking about how to use these new technologies to reach a wider audience.
What's remarkable is that he's not just mimicking MTV.
Right.
He's deconstructing it.
Yeah.
analyzing its underlying mechanisms.
Interesting.
He's interested in understanding how pop culture shapes perception,
Okay.
how it influences our thoughts and desires.
Yeah.
He even writes, "What I have is an ability to create what is not perceived."
Wow.
It's like he wants to hack the system, to use the tools of mass media to challenge conventions, to introduce new ways of seeing the world.
And speaking of challenging conventions,
Yeah.
amidst all these logos and website plans, we also find these philosophical gems
Right.
just sprinkled throughout.
Yeah.
He writes, time can be looked at as many different things, and then goes on to explore the various ways in which we perceive and measure time.
Right.
It's a reminder that beneath the surface of this pop culture savvy entrepreneur,
Yeah.
there's a deep thinker grappling with fundamental questions about the nature of reality.
Absolutely. He's not just interested in creating a brand.
Yeah.
He's trying to understand the very fabric of existence.
Wow.
And these philosophical musings are intertwined with his creative process,
Right.
shaping the vision of Brian Mill's world.
This is where the source material starts to feel like a puzzle box,
Yeah.
With these seemingly disparate elements, marketing plans,
Yeah.
philosophical ponderings, sketches of logos,
It's all jumbled together.
all jumbled together.
But that's what makes it so fascinating.
Right.
It's a glimpse into the messy, unpredictable nature of creativity.
Yeah.
He's not afraid to jump between ideas
Right.
to explore seemingly unrelated concepts.
Yeah.
Because he understands that inspiration can come from the most unexpected places.
I'm starting to see that this deep dive isn't just about decoding Brian Mill's world.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the mind of the man behind it.
Precisely. And the deeper we dig, the more complex and intriguing this portrait becomes.
For sure.
But to really understand the evolution of Brian Mill's world,
Yeah.
we need to move beyond Amsterdam and into the heart of his Hawaiian experience.
Okay, let's do it.
And Hawaii, that's where his vision for Brian Mill's world, really begins to crystallize.
Okay.
He's not just brainstorming anymore.
Yeah.
He's laying out a framework,
Yeah.
outlining these core principles.
Okay, so let's dive into that framework.
Yeah.
What exactly are these core principles,
Okay.
and how do they reflect the evolution of his thinking?
Well, he outlines 4 key principles:
Right.
accurate thought,
Go.
purity of action, practical application,
Okay.
and then self-control, freedom.
Okay.
These principles seem to represent a shift.
Yeah. Right.
From the more chaotic energy of his Amsterdam entries toward a more disciplined,
Okay.
almost spiritual
Right.
approach to creativity.
That makes sense.
He's still obsessed with big ideas like time and purpose and reality.
Yeah.
But now he's looking for a way to ground those ideas in a practical, actionable framework.
Exactly. And that's where the concept of selfishness as an aesthetic comes into play.
Okay.
Now, I know that phrase might sound a bit jarring at first.
Yeah, it does sound a bit provocative.
Yeah.
Help me understand, how does selfishness fit into an artistic philosophy?
Well, in art history, there's this long-standing debate about the role of the artist's ego.
Right.
Should art be purely about self-expression?
Okay.
Or should it serve a higher purpose?
Mm-hmm.
Think of artists like Caravaggio.
Or Van Gogh.
Right.
Their work is deeply personal, even
Mhm.
confessional.
Yeah.
And it often challenged social norms.
Okay.
Mills seems to be embracing this idea of art as a deeply personal act,
Right.
a way of processing his own experiences and worldview,
I see.
even if it means pushing boundaries or going against the grain.
So it's not about being narcissistic or self-centered. It's about using your art to explore your own truth.
Exactly.
Your own unique perspective, even if it's unconventional or controversial.
Exactly. And this ties back to his interest in the MTV formula.
Okay.
He's not just interested in creating something that is commercially successful.
Right.
He wants to create something that is authentic, that reflects his own values and beliefs, even if it means challenging the status quo.
And that brings us to a rather unexpected entry in the notebook.
Oh, really?
A conversation with Marla Maples,
Wow.
where she criticizes Donald Trump's character.
Interesting. How does this seemingly random anecdote fit into the bigger picture of Brian Mill's world?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
I think it serves as a reminder that Mills is not just this disembodied creative force. He's a real person.
Right.
Living in a specific time and place.
Right.
He's observing the world around him, interacting with people, and those experiences are filtering into his creative process.
It also highlights that contrast between his more philosophical, introspective side
Yeah.
and his fascination with pop culture and celebrity. And like he's straddling these two worlds, trying to find a way to bridge the gap between them.
Precisely. So how does this tension play out in his actual creative output? We've seen the sketches, the logos, the website plans, but what about the actual art?
That's where the images included in your source material come in.
Okay.
Take, for example, the notebook covers.
All right.
They're adorned with these striking, almost surreal images.
Okay.
Like a close-up of an eye, a distorted figure, a hand reaching out from a vortex.
Right.
These images feel both personal and universal.
I see.
Reflecting his fascination with perception, identity, and the nature of reality.
I'm particularly drawn to that pyramid drawing.
Oh, yeah.
It's labeled Brian Mills' World with the text, "Why is Brian Mills in Hawaii?"
Right.
It's like he's visually mapping out his own existence, questioning his place in the universe.
Exactly. And that pyramid motif, it's repeated throughout his work.
Okay.
It represents his desire to build something solid, something lasting, but it's also inherently unstable.
Okay.
Always on the verge of collapse.
And then there are those sketches of Brian Mills' World logos. Some are sleek and modern, others are more chaotic, almost graffiti-like.
I think it reflects the duality we've been talking about.
Right.
That tension between order and chaos.
Yeah.
Between his desire for mass appeal and his commitment to artistic authenticity. He's playing with different visual languages, trying to find a style that embodies the essence of his vision.
It's like he's trying to find a visual representation for this world he's created, a world that is both personal and universal, both accessible and challenging.
Exactly, and that's what makes Brian Mills' World so intriguing. It's not a static concept. It's a constantly evolving process of exploration and self-discovery.
And speaking of self-discovery, there's a recurring theme in the notebooks. Mirrors and self-portraits.
Interesting.
He's constantly drawing himself, photographing himself, even depicting himself as this multi-faced Hindu god.
Wow, why this obsession with his own image?
I think it's a reflection of his search for identity.
Okay.
His desire to understand the different facets of himself. He's not just an artist. He's a philosopher, a businessman, a social commentator. He's all of these things at once, and he's trying to reconcile those different aspects of himself through his art. You mentioned earlier that his notebook entries take a turn towards a more structured approach. How does that manifest in his creative output?
This is where we start to see a shift from the more free-flowing stream of consciousness style of the earlier entries towards a more deliberate, almost scientific approach. To documenting his ideas. He creates lists, outlines, even forms for cataloging his inspiration.
Can you give us an example of what you mean?
Sure. He develops this detailed idea, hashtag form, complete with fields for the date name of the idea, items needed inspirations, music point of interest, ulterior motives, even win conditions.
Wow.
It's like he's trying to impose structure on the creative process to like break it down into its component parts.
That's so interesting. It's almost like he's trying to reverse engineer the creative process to understand how inspiration works.
Exactly. And it speaks to his ambition. His desire to not just be a passive recipient of inspiration, but to actively cultivate it, to control it.
But despite this newfound structure, he still embraces spontaneity, right?
Absolutely.
He still values the unexpected, the unplanned moments of inspiration.
In fact, he explicitly states that he thrives on impromptu and unplanned creative bursts.
Interesting.
He's constantly pushing himself to step outside of his comfort zone, to explore new territories, to challenge his own assumptions.
This brings us to a fascinating entry where he analyzes Chairman Mao's use of propaganda.
What do you make of his fascination with propaganda techniques?
It's a bit unsettling at first, but I think it's important to remember that he's approaching this from an artistic, analytical perspective. He's interested in understanding how images and symbols can be used to shape public perception. How they can be used to convey a message, to evoke an emotional response.
He even suggests contrasting Mao's propaganda with images of Elvis Presley.
Wow.
It's like he's trying to find a balance between subversion and mass appeal. Between challenging conventions and tapping into something universally recognizable.
And that tension is evident throughout his work. He's drawn to both the avant-garde and the mainstream, the intellectual and the visceral. He's constantly pushing boundaries. But he also understands the power of connection
Yeah.
The need to communicate his ideas in a way that resonates with a wider audience.
So he's not just an artist.
Right.
He's a cultural critic, a social commentator.
Yeah.
Someone who is acutely aware of the ways in which power dynamics shape our perceptions of the world.
This is where the concept of Enoism comes in.
Okay.
He talks about the study of the now and the after,
right,
and the importance of experiencing monarchical realities simultaneously.
Mm-hmm. Can you unpack that a bit for us? What exactly does he mean by Enoism?
It's a fascinating concept, and I think it's one of his most significant contributions to the world of art and philosophy.
Wow.
He's essentially articulating a way of being present in the moment, embracing the totality of experience. Yeah.
While also recognizing that our reality is constantly shifting, evolving, expanding.
He's talking about virtual reality before it was even a mainstream concept.
Right.
And it's clear that he sees Bryan Mill's world as a way to facilitate these multiple realities through art, technology, and experience.
Exactly. He's creating a framework for a way of life that embraces exploration, self-discovery, and the blurring of boundaries.
And this is all within the context of a handwritten notebook from 1999.
It's remarkable.
It's like he's a time traveler, sending us messages from the future, clues about how to navigate this increasingly complex and interconnected world.
And he's not just talking about the future.
Oh, yeah.
He's also deeply connected to the past.
Right.
He's constantly referencing history, art history, mythology, drawing inspiration from this vast reservoir of human experience.
But he's not simply imitating the past.
Right.
He's reinterpreting it. Filtering it through his own unique lens. Exactly. He's taking those influences and weaving them together into something new and unexpected.
Right.
Something that reflects his own vision, his own understanding of the world.
This brings us to another key element of Bryan Mill's world.
Okay.
His fascination with the human body.
Okay.
He's constantly drawing figures, body parts.
Yeah.
Even imagining this human animal suit.
Right. What's behind this obsession with the physical form?
I think it's tied to his interest in perception.
Okay.
And how our bodies shape our understanding of the world.
Yeah.
He's exploring the boundaries between the self and the other.
Right.
The human and the animal. The physical and the spiritual.
He even writes, what if humans realize they are only animals?
It's like he's challenging our anthropocentric view of the world.
Right.
Reminding us that we are part of a larger ecosystem.
Yeah.
Interconnected with all living things.
And that interconnectedness is a recurring theme in his work.
Absolutely.
He's constantly drawing parallels between the natural world and the human body, between the cycles of nature and the rhythms of our lives.
He writes about the ocean, the sun, the trees, finding inspiration in their beauty and power.
And he's not just observing nature passively.
Right.
He's actively engaging with it.
Yeah.
He writes about swimming in the ocean, feeling the sun on his skin, listening to the wind in the trees.
It's like he's trying to absorb the energy of the natural world.
Right.
To connect with something larger than himself.
And that connection to nature seems to fuel his creativity.
Right.
He often writes about having his best ideas while traveling, being outdoors while surrounded by natural beauty.
So it's not just about creating art.
Right.
It's about living a life that is in harmony with nature.
Yeah.
Life that is full of sensory experience. A life that embraces the totality of the human experience.
Precisely. And that's what Bryan Mill's world is all about.
Yeah.
Creating a space where those values can flourish.
Right.
Where people can connect with themselves, with each other.
Yeah.
And with the world around them. You know, it feels like we've been on this incredible journey, like exploring all these different facets of Bryan Mill's.
Right.
The artist, the philosopher, the tech enthusiast, even the gossip columnist.
Yeah.
But there's this one element that keeps like popping up, almost like a hidden code running through everything.
Right.
This concept of Bryan Mill's world itself, it's more than just a brand, you know, more than a website, more than even an art project.
Yeah.
It feels almost like a philosophy.
It's a way of life.
Yeah.
You know, a way of seeing the world, a way of being.
Yeah.
And what's so remarkable is that he's attempting to articulate this philosophy, like to give it form and structure back in 1999.
Right.
He's anticipating so many trends that would define the 21st century.
Right.
The blurring of online and offline identities.
Yeah.
The rise of virtual realities. The importance of personal branding.
It's almost prophetic.
Yeah.
He's creating a blueprint for how to navigate a world that's increasingly complex. Right.
Chaotic and interconnected.
But it's not just about surviving.
Right.
It's about thriving.
Remember that line, we are all God in our own world?
Oh, yeah.
He's not just talking about creating art. He's talking about creating a reality that reflects our deepest values, our most authentic selves.
And he's not afraid to get his hands dirty in the process.
Right.
He's not just a passive observer.
Yeah.
He's a doer.
He's building websites, designing flyers, planning events, even brainstorming marketing strategies.
He understands that ideas need to be translated into action.
Yeah.
That creativity requires both vision and execution.
But this Bryan Mills world, it's not a utopia, is it?
Right.
There's a darkness that runs through his work.
Yeah.
A fascination with the shadow side of human nature, with the limits of perception.
Right.
Even with death.
Absolutely. He's not shying away from the difficult questions, you know, the uncomfortable truths.
Remember that chilling line, staring into my own dead eyes?
Oh, wow. He's confronting mortality, the fleeting nature of time, the inevitability of loss.
But I think there's also a beauty in that darkness.
Okay.
A recognition that life is precious, precisely because it is finite.
It's like he's saying, don't waste your time on things that don't matter.
Right.
Create something meaningful, something that reflects your true self, something that will leave a mark on the world.
And that brings us back to those 4 core principles he outlines. Accurate thought, purity of action, practical application, and then self-control freedom.
Yeah.
These aren't just guidelines for creating art.
Right.
They're guidelines for living a life that is both creative and meaningful.
So how do we apply those principles to our own lives? How do we create our own version of Bryan Mills' world?
I think it starts with self-awareness.
Okay.
With understanding our own strengths and weaknesses, our values and beliefs.
Right.
It's about being honest with ourselves, about what we want to achieve, what kind of impact we want to make on the world.
He talks a lot about questioning everything, even our own perceptions. Yeah. It's like he's challenging us to be more critical thinkers, to not just accept things at face value, but to dig deeper, to explore different perspectives.
And it's about being willing to experiment, to take risks, to step outside of our comfort zones.
Remember how he's constantly trying new things?
Oh, yeah.
Blending different styles, challenging conventions? Yeah. That's the spirit of Bryan Mills' world.
It's not about following a formula.
Right.
It's about finding your own unique path.
Yeah.
Your own way of expressing yourself, your own way of making a difference in the world.
And I think it's important to remember that it's a journey, not a destination.
Right.
Bryan Mills' world is not a finished product. Yeah. It's a process of ongoing creation and evolution.
He's leaving us with a challenge, you know, an invitation to join him on this journey of self-discovery and creative exploration.
And even though we may never fully understand the mystery of Bryan Mills, the fragments of his vision that we've uncovered today offer a powerful reminder that creativity can be a force for good.
Yeah.
A way to connect with ourselves, with each other, and with the world around us.
And that's a legacy worth celebrating.
Absolutely.
Even if it exists only in the pages of a tattered notebook.
Right.
A testament to the power of one man's imagination.
So as you go about your day, consider this. What world will you create?
What will your legacy be?